Hello and welcome back to the Movie Memo Recaps. Today we are going to recap a 2008 movie titled Taken. Please be advised that there might be spoilers ahead. The film opens with a recording of a young girl's birthday party. Bryan Mills wakes up by opening her toys and blowing out her 5-year-old birthday cake, then turns on his lamp and looks at a portrait. That morning, Bryan goes to a nearby store to purchase a karaoke machine. He then cheerfully wrapped the gift and departed. Later in the day, Bryan travels to a stunning estate for his daughter's birthday celebration. His ex-wife, Lenore, immediately approaches him. The two clearly disagree by not allowing him to enter the children's section, and Bryan's daughter runs in and embraces him. Kim then opens the gift to reveal a karaoke machine and thanks her father, as she wishes to be a singer one day. Simultaneously, Kim's stepfather steps in with a horse, demonstrating his wealth and accomplishment. Stuart instantly taunts Bryan, and it's clear that these two have more beef. Later that night, Bryan places Kim's birthday photo in her picture book and reminisces about the wonderful old days in the privacy of his home. Feeling lonely, his pals unexpectedly surprise him with beers and a simple cookout. They discuss Bryan's status as a retired military and chuckle at his attention to detail problem, which requires him to know everything about everyone. The four men then share a chuckle and discuss their wonderful experiences while stationed together. On their way out, Sam informs Bryan about an opportunity to transport a singer to and from her event for $2,500. Given the value of only 4 hours of work, he certainly answers yes, because I would not recap this trilogy if he turned down that offer. The following night, Bryan and his buddies accompanied pop diva Shira to the festival. Bryan introduces himself to the celebrity as she enters her room to get ready, mentioning that he has a daughter who wants to be a singer and asking if she has any advice. Shira advises him to pursue another career and then goes on to perform. As the boys play poker while waiting for the festival to end, Bryan receives a call from Kim, who is pleased that her father was able to meet Shira. She mentions wanting to eat lunch with him tomorrow, something a father could not be happier about. After finishing, Shira is on her way to her car when a gate swings open, allowing a flood of people to enter. A man with a knife attacks Shira and Bryan as they walk, but they easily apprehend him. Bryan swiftly whisks the pop sensation into the car and offers her a drink to calm her down. She starts to cry and falls asleep on Bryan's shoulder. At the end of the night, all men receive their compensation. Bryan receives a request to visit Shira in her room, where he finds a receptive woman. She hands Bryan a card and explains that his daughter could be a singer. The card contains both her vocal coaches and manager's phone numbers, and the money is hers. Bryan thanked her, and she thanked him for saving her life. After this, Bryan eagerly anticipates the arrival of his daughter, along with his ex-wife. Kim tells her father that her friend Amanda is going to France with her cousins and has invited her to join them. Because she is under 18, both parents must sign for her to leave the country without them, which upsets Bryan, who assumed his daughter wanted to simply go out with him. Nonetheless, he expresses his discomfort with her travel and offers to accompany her. Lenore accepts her offer, but before he can show her the card he got for her, Kim begins to cry and flees. Lenore then has a one-on-one with Bryan, making sure her insults hit home before leaving as well. Feeling terrible, he quickly returns to Kim and accepts the condition that she call him every night. His daughter reacts loudly and happily. When the time comes, Bryan drives Kim to the airport and advises her on which locations to avoid in Paris. Kim notes that her mother labels him a paranoid because of his employment, which she only knows was government facilitated. Kim kisses her father and arrives at the airport shortly after they share a D&M. Problematically, when emptying the luggage, Bryan notices a detailed map with numerous locations, routes, and dates on it. When Lenore arrives, he questions her, and she admits to knowing Kim's genuine travel plans. She wants to follow a rock band's tour of Europe. Bryan is furious after hearing this, and Lenore begs him not to break their daughter's heart. He accepts her, smiles to keep her happy, and snaps a photo of her before releasing her. Soon enough, Kim and Amanda arrive in Paris and are about to take a photo when a stranger offers his services. Peter introduces himself, and he and the two girls exchange some banter before Peter offers them a ride to their destination. Bryan, as expected, phones his daughter, who is currently hanging out with Peter outside Amanda's home. Peter asks the girls to a party that night, which Amanda agrees despite Kim's reservations, and he instructs them to be ready at 9. Peter phones someone immediately after leaving the two girls, informing them that there are two 18-year-old girls on the 5th floor. Meanwhile, the two ladies are pleased to be overseas together, but Kim is upset that Amanda lied about staying in hotels, despite the fact that they were at her cousin's apartment. Amanda doesn't give it any thought and simply turns on some music. At the same time, Bryan tries to call his daughter, but Amanda's insanity prevents her from hearing the phone ring. Bryan chooses to call Lenore, who swiftly instructs him to stop being paranoid and hangs up the phone. Finally, Kim notices her father ringing and goes to a quiet section of the home to answer the phone. Bryan says he'd like to talk with one of Amanda's relatives, and Kim admits they're not there but maintains she didn't know. Kim's heart drops when she notices men approaching Amanda from behind and grabbing her. It appears that a kidnapping is taking place in real time, and Bryan swiftly gathers as much information as he can from her. He records the phone, discovers there are 3 to 4 persons, and tells her to hide beneath a bed. He then tells his daughter that the men will find her, but he wants her to be strong and leave the phone on the floor while they haul her away, screaming the captor's details. She keeps silent, her heart beating, as Bryan listens to the men converse. However, they simply walk out of the room, leaving Kim relieved until she is grabbed from underneath the bed, forcing Bryan to listen to the worst thing a father could ever hear. After realizing the kidnappers had picked up his daughter's phone, he sends them the most terrifying threat I've ever heard. "If you don't let my daughter go, I'll find and kill you." Bryan rushes to Lenore's house, confronts her with Stuart, and immediately calls Sam to investigate the voice. Taking command of the situation, he instructs Stuart to use his connections to fly him to Paris right once, when Sam phones him back and informs him that the man was an Albanian named Marco who is a gangster boss. Known for trafficking, he lately determined that traveling women are an easier target and kidnaps them, addicts them, and basically wrecks their life. Lenore breaks down in tears as she realizes she has only 96 hours to find Kim forever. Bryan boards a plane and listens to the call repeatedly, during which the kidnapper teases him, saying, after arriving in Paris, Bryan quickly sneaks into Amanda's cousin's home by scaling the apartment from another level. When he breaks in, he immediately searches for clues to the kidnapping and sees a wrecked house. Listening to the phone audio, he imagines where his daughter was when they grabbed her from underneath the bed. He examines a broken mirror and picks up a bloodstained glass shard as proof. Collecting the SD card from Kim's phone, he searches through its images until he discovers Peter's reflection in a photo of the girls taken earlier. Back at the airport, Peter sits down and is alerted by a man. Peter follows a woman and immediately asks her to share a cab because they are expensive. Just as she accepts, Bryan throws Peter into the cab and begins extracting information from the lowlife. As the previous man tries to save Peter, he is easily knocked down by the arrival of police, prompting Bryan to hijack the cab and pursue Peter. With nothing else to go, Peter chooses to jump, landing smartly on a truck underneath him and on the street. Regrettably, a random truck hits him, forcing Bryan to retreat. He does not give up, however, and reconnects with one of his former acquaintances, a man named Jean-Claude. Jean-Claude, now a major position in the administration, immediately informs Bryan about his daughter's abduction and directs him to a poor region at night. As expected, Bryan travels down to the exact location, but not before picking up a translator named Gregor. Bryan goes to the street and begins interacting with a woman after paying him 10 hours in advance. The woman tries to leave, realizing he isn't there for a good time, but Bryan deliberately annoys her until a man approaches and pushes the girls away. The man then grabs Bryan, installs an audio bug on him, and forces him to hand over $50 as compensation for the business he has caused. After he departs, Bryan turns on the bug and asks his translator to tell him what the men are saying. They appear to be engaged in sports and are speaking on a building site until one man remarks that the new goods is causing them problems. Bryan commends the translator for his efforts and departs, but he seems to be followed. That night, there is a queue at a construction site to enter a small building. Bryan covers his face and pays his dues before entering, only to find covered-up temporary chambers with numbers on them. Upon reaching his assigned room number, he discovers a woman lying there, her arms adorned with marks. Disgusted by the men who are imprisoning these women, he travels from room to room looking for his daughter or Amanda. His attention to detail pays off unexpectedly when he notices his daughter's jacket. He asks the woman how she got the item, but she is too intoxicated to comprehend. Meanwhile, a man walks in and gives them a beating. Bryan becomes enraged and begins demolishing each thug in his path, killing some of them. The rest of T as he secures the girl in the car and faces gunfire, the remaining miserable lowlifes attempt to apprehend him. In all directions, and Bryan determines that running is the preferable option, but not before producing an explosion to slow his opponents. As he flies through the job site, his pursuers close up and shot at him. He manages to fully flip one of their cars, however, and continues while more follow closely after. Bryan decides to pull up next to the man from earlier, so eliminating one more useless life. He cleverly covers the thug's windshield with mud from beneath himself, causing him to crash. Bryan swiftly finds his way onto the road, but the tail from earlier phones Jean-Claude and informs him that he is monitoring him. Bryan observes this, however, and drives through a red light to avoid yet more inconvenience. Bryan hijacks and switches cars to avoid further irritants, before heading to an old buddy and booking a place for himself and the girl. He finally takes a break after giving her some medication to aid with her agony. Suddenly, his phone rings, and Jean-Claude is on the other end, eager to speak. The following day, as Bryan waits for him, he learns that the government is preparing to arrest him due to his misbehavior. However, thanks to Bryan's previous efforts, Jean-Claude was able to get a first-class trip back home for him. But with 7 people dead and buildings ruined, Bryan must depart. Bryan refuses, making a spectacle of the French agents before walking away as if nothing happened. After the girl he rescued awakens and becomes panicked, Bryan later begins studying Albanian. After calming her down, he inquires as to where she got the jacket, pointing to a house where a small girl had given her the garment. Crying, she reveals a sign she recalls seeing near her abduction location. Bryan swiftly makes his way to the abduction location, enters the complex, hands over his friend's card, and threatens to use 30 agents until he speaks with the boss. The employer agrees to a meeting, at which point Bryan gathers other men and asserts his desire to negotiate the fee. They assert that they have already successfully negotiated the fee with Mr. McCann, who Bryan adds has relocated. The men there, mistaking him for Jean-Claude, listen attentively as he asks them to identify the correct answer. He lectures them and demands 20% of profits for at least a year, threatening them with an additional 10% if they do not respond to his queries. As a result, one of the men hands him some money, prompting Bryan to hand over an Albanian note for the men to translate for him. They chuckle, and one of them wishes him luck. This is the same person who threatened him earlier on the phone. Bryan tells the men that he has found him, and he discovers his identity just before a brawl breaks out. Bryan, on the other hand, is not playing around and thoroughly destroys any man who dares to approach him. He kills one after the other, not missing a single shot, and then proceeds upstairs to locate abducted girls in each room. Nevertheless, he discovers Amanda, who has unhappily died. Bryan takes the prisoner who told him good luck earlier and uses torture tactics learned from previous experiences to extract information from him. The man goes to great lengths, refusing to speak and spitting in Bryan's face, causing him immense anguish. Upon his ultimate surrender, he asserts that a man named St. Clair purchased Kim. Bryan gets what he wants, leaves his prisoner electrocuted, and goes away, knowing he will die as a result. When Jean-Claude returns home to his family that night, he also encounters Bryan. Jean-Claude takes up a revolver before returning to the dinner table, where he prepares to put his children to bed. Bryan mentions Mr. McCann's name, and the wife recognizes him. Bryan questions his friend about his involvement in this situation, to which Jean-Claude responds that he is taking bribes to look away. He then points his gun at Bryan, saying he's taking him to the airport, to which Bryan responds by throwing the pistol's rounds on the table, having already emptied the weapon. Taking his own weapon, he shoots his wife in the shoulder before threatening her life. Jean-Claude eventually agrees to search for St. Clair and offers the address and photo he is looking for. Bryan then knocks out his pal and discovers where his daughter is. As expected, Bryan arrives with an undercover cop badge and enters a party. Looking around, he notices his low-life target entering an elevator and rapidly approaches, holding a guard at gunpoint. After knocking him out, Bryan roams the establishment until a waiter spots him. Bryan takes him out and disguises himself as a waiter, killing one of the miserable lowlifes involved in this heinous act. Bryan then sees a room full of wealthy scumbags purchasing their own personal play toys, which retail for hundreds of millions. Bryan then spots his daughter, who starts at $100,000. He compels the man in the room with him to bid, and he wins the auction for $500,000. However, as Bryan rushes to retrieve Kim, someone drops him. When he regains consciousness, St. Clair realizes Kim is his daughter and informs him that he is also a father. However, business is business, and he has to die. As he escapes, the goons rush to murder him, but they severely misjudge his abilities when he breaks free and kills one attacker at a time, using one of their own guns against them. The man belonging to St. Clair then investigates the gunshot, only to discover that he has also been killed. Bullets fire into St. Clair, exposing Kim's whereabouts, before Bryan kills him. Running straight out, he notices the car his daughter is driving and sprints through the streets to keep up. When he notices the boat that all the girls are on, he decides to hijack a car as a fresh strategy. Flying through the streets, he even uses the footpath to rapidly get to a bridge. He carefully avoids traffic, nearly colliding with cars headed his way, while the previous buyer converses with his boss on the boat. Bryan then rushes to the bridge as the boat passes by, discreetly taking out a man on board. As he uncovers a second target, the boat tosses him overboard, guiding the females to their respective apartments. In the end, the men on board locate Bryan and set out to search for him, only to find themselves under attack. As the gunshots resound, the other men stand prepared. They disperse and search for their target, who, even under the fire of an automatic weapon, dispatches them. When he runs out of ammunition, he engages in close quarters combat with the boss's right-hand man, and he fights valiantly. Bryan eventually overcomes himself and terminates his sad, pointless life. Going into the main room to meet his daughter, the man offered to compromise, but Kim can't believe her father traveled around the world, killed so many people, and found her when no government could. They finally return home after giving each other a long hug. Stuart reunites Kim with her mother and assures Bryan that he has everything he needs. Lenore then approaches her ex and expresses gratitude to him via tears. He receives a hug, and the family departs, but not before Kim thanks her father once again for everything he has done for her. Some time later, Bryan takes his daughter to meet Shira. Kim is literally speechless, but is invited inside to begin her new musical career. Thank you for watching. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe for more recaps. Until next time, have a nice day.